welcome to a special Tablet Week edition of Android Developers Strike Back.
Tablet Week is like Shark Week, except not nearly as boring.
It's true. It's very true. In fact, we're going to have a look at 3 tablet apps today. We've got the developers from Mint, Tiny Company, and the Instapaper developers as well.
I think they actually call themselves TinyCo.
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 All right. Okay.
Tiny Company kind of sounds like one of their games, actually.
Actually, that's very true. All right. Well, we will ask the TinyCo guys about their naming choice for their brand when we speak to them. So we've got those 3 apps to go through. We're going to try and spend about 10 minutes on each, find out a little bit about their experience developing 4 tablets, what successes they've had, what tips they've got for other developers looking to develop for tablet as well.
Excellent. So I think we're going to start with Mint.com.
We are going to start with Mint.
Absolutely. Let's see if I got the slides right.
There we go.
Check that out.
Nice. Very nice. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and Mint.
Sure. So my name is Brian Tan, and I'm actually the product owner for the Android side for Mint.com. So I'm just happy to be here and happy to talk a little bit about Mint and kind of our tablet experience.
Outstanding. So I'm going to ask the same few questions to everyone. I think we'll start off. Just tell us a little bit about Mint, about the app which you've designed for tablet. A little bit about the experiences around. What makes this a tablet-specific version of the app?
Sure. So Mint.com first off is a way for you to take a look at your finances on our tablet. Essentially, we aggregate all of your various accounts, credit accounts, checking accounts, and things of that sort on the tablet, so that you can have one view of your finances and basically stay on top of it. We have a website, and then we wanted to build a tablet app. And so what we did is we decided to take kind of the best of what was on the web and then bring it to the tablet. But more specifically, we want to build this thing from the ground up. We want to make it native. And then we said we want to make it cool. We want to make it interesting. I mean, finances, for the most part, people don't really think of it as cool and interesting, right?
No, it's not what I do for fun.
So on the overview screen here that we've got, basically we've tried to make it a very rich experience.
Mm-hmm.
We have a nice little graphic in the upper left-hand corner.
Dan, can you bring that up, actually?
Yeah, hold on a second.
Sure, just so that you can quickly see kind of where your finances are in terms of what you're spending. We've got nice little bar graphs on the right, and then nice little icons that represent spending there.
By the way, I hope you don't mind that I totally stole this UI for my custom and controls class. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't actually see that, but that's cool. We like to hear that.
Well, I remember that you guys came in to show
really
us
nice.
This when I think it was actually pre-Honeycomb launch.
I think it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we were having some problems because of course that was a new GPU for everybody,
Right.
and there were some issues. We couldn't get it hardware accelerated at the normal canvas, and it wasn't working quite fast enough. And we looked at it, wasn't buttery smooth, and you guys really wanted it to be really super smooth. And so we, I think we ended up recommending that you draw it on its own hardware layer.
No, definitely. I mean, this screen right here, the spending by category screen, is kind of that one thing that we want to get right. We wanted to make sure that interacting with your finances was kind of this very immersive experience, and that buttery smooth, rotation of the screen, clicking on or tapping on the slices, even slowing down to kind of move between the slices. We wanted to get that 100% right, and that was just something that we poured a lot of effort and a lot of time into.
It's
Absolutely.
really nice. It really gives that feeling that this is an app that it feels solid.
Right.
It's like there's no jankiness, there's no, I can see what they tried to do there. It just kind of works exactly as you'd hope it does.
You can see one thing that may not come out in the video, but something that really impressed us and really made it run slower is there's just a really light gradient all the way around here. And we talk a lot about gradients because there are some design guides belonging to our competitors that emphasize gradients in a way that we find less Androidy. But this is a great use of gradients. It's a wonderful, you wouldn't even know it's there if it wasn't pointed out to you, but it makes the whole thing feel a little deeper, a little more lifelike. And of course, it slowed down rendering because the gradients at that time were done in software. But once you rendered that all out onto one layer, then you can rotate the layer without actually having to redraw all the gradients every time.
Yeah, I mean, our designers are very thankful that you noticed the gradient. I'm thankful of it. I mean, again, it's just one of those things that, in addition to the interaction piece and getting that right, the visual aspect, the colors, the gradients, and even kind of the blend of the colors. You know, we spent a lot of time on that, and we're very, very proud of it.
Well, it's one of those big challenges. I mean, it seems funny, like it's such a deceptively simple screen that we're looking at here. It's a simple pie, donut chart, you know, with a simple sort of explanation of what each thing represents. But it's all those little things. Like I think anyone who's done any kind of engineering for any amount of time has built charting controls from scratch, because it's like databases. It's a requirement of every job you ever do to start from the beginning. And even simple things like choosing what colors you're going to have, because you don't necessarily know how many categories you're going to have, so it's a pseudo-random color generator. But you need to make sure that each one is noticeable and that they look well together. And you know, I think that attention to detail really works well.
Well, and even making it a donut instead of a pie, I think.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if this is what you had in mind, but it feels like that gives me a clue that I'm going to interact with it instead of just looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like one of those spinning wheels. You know,
Yeah,
where
like
you
a
can
wheel of
move
fortune,
dice.
like-
In
Exactly,
fact, that's
like a wheel
that's
of
the
fortune.
one thing that,
Exactly.
you know, when I did my version, I had to add in was the, you know, the ability to just
And we're spending money on
make it
health and
spin
fitness.
faster and faster. Yeah. Great.
Very cool. All right, so I guess the two questions I had. So the first one is, so you already had a phone app and a website before you had the tablet app. What would you say is sort of the biggest change that you've made in order to make something which was really a great tablet experience as opposed to the phone version? And sort of, you know, more than that, what was the result? So, you know, what did you do, and how has that affected your install rate or your engagement or any of those sorts of things?
Right. So, you know, when we first developed the tablet app, as you said, we had a phone app already. And, you know, we weren't 100% sure kind of where folks would fall in terms of how they would use both apps. So we said, let's release a basic version of the tablet app, and then let's kind of get some data and let's iterate against that. And so one of the things that we started to find with the tablet app is that people were actually spending more time on the tablet app. Basically, they're sitting there, they're looking back in their finances, and they're also looking forward into their finances.
So it's doing sort of the analysis and planning.
Exactly. Whereas on the phone, it's kind of like this decision maker. You know, like you might be at the store and you might decide, should I really buy this TV? You know, you pop open this thing and you figure out, yes, I can, right?
How much is in my consumer electronics budget for this?
Right, exactly. And then so we started to move down that route of empowering the user on the tablet to do things like, you know, editing budgets and doing split transactions and just being able to do more in terms of really kind of setting their financial foundation and, you know, looking back at their data and making sure it's kind of jiving with what they think.
Nice.
So, you know, our analogy is our phone app is basically a snacking app. Like throughout the day, you're popping peanuts or you're, you know, eating, you know, candy bars and whatnot. And then with the tablet app, it's basically like a full meal. You'll sit down and you'll kind of digest the overview, and then you'll, you know, go deeper into budgets and you'll start editing your budgets and things of that sort.
I like that. That's a nice analogy. So, if I understand the app correctly, so are you actually putting your spending into the app as you're spending it? So if you're out at the shops, you're actually putting that budgetary information in via the phone app?
Yeah, so basically on your tablet app, you can go and set your budgets, you can edit your budgets, and then when you have your phone app, you know, that very same budget that you've set, you can clearly see how much money you've got left for this particular month, and then you can dive deeper into the various, you know, subcategories and whatnot. And then, you know, conversely, when you're on your phone, you can enter transactions on the go and on the fly, and then when you get home, you know, you can see them show up on your tablet, and
Exactly
you can
how-
go in and do a little bit more if you wanted to.
Nice. So you can find out what punishment you've done to your budgets
Yeah.
on your phone when you get back home. Well, that's nice. So, so does that mean that the tablet app, is that something that's sort of a feature-for-feature equivalent of what you can do on the website? Do you sort of see that in the future as sort of becoming more and more the way that maybe people are going to be using the app via
Definitely.
tablet rather than the web?
I mean, you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of, you know, we've got a website, we've got a tablet, we've got a phone. You know, where does the tablet sit in between? And it's looking more and more like, you know, it may kind of replace the web. It may kind of, you know, so we'll bring some of those more web-like features to the tablet, and then we'll keep the phone to be very simple, very decision-oriented, or kind of enter information-oriented. And then on the tablet, you can do your analysis.
Nice. I mean, that's, I think, something which we go on about quite a bit, which is the idea that on a phone, you really want to have almost a single action. Sort of you open it up and there's sort of one or two steps to do whatever it is you want to do. Check to see whether I can buy this thing, or, you know, basically enter the information that I have bought this thing.
Right.
Whereas on the tablet, you are expecting people to sit down and spend a bit more time, so you can have a little bit more of a complex workflow and have more complex actions to complete.
And our data tells us exactly that. I mean, you know, to the point about snacking and dining, I mean, on the tablet app, we see most people hopping into the app at about 8, after 8 p.m.
Yeah, right.
And that's when our usage spikes between 8 and 10. So, maybe
Nice.
folks put the kids down to bed and then they pick up Mint for, and then maybe they're in bed talking with their wife or husband or whatnot about
We really
the
need this
finances.
TV, and look, we can make it work.
Exactly.
I can see that.
Nice.
That's cool. And so, did you see then? Obviously, you've got a lot of analytics, which is again something which we tell people that they need to do. You need to understand what impact the decisions you're making about your app has on its usage. So, did you see as you were sort of adding more of that dining experience to tablet that your usage was increasing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen, a fair amount of usage in terms of just, installs in the app, and then just in terms of, overall time spent in the app.
great.
I believe the number was in the magnitude of 25% more time on the app, versus on the phone. So, again, big thing for us, to know that and to kind of make that decision and go down that path.
Very cool. No, it sounds like a lot of thought and effort has gone into every aspect of this, which is really great to see, and you can see that from the polished effect.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to point out as well, because we had Mint, I think was one of the nominees for one of our app clinics a while back, but we didn't spend much time on it because A, it was already great, and B, we didn't have a demo account to log into.
Right.
But one thing I want to highlight for people watching is that this is an app that looks very much like Mint. It doesn't look a lot like Holo. It's got more gradients than we would usually expect to see, things like these reflections, but it really works.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's something which we spend a lot of time telling people. Like sometimes you can watch our show and think we're basically saying make every app look like it should be a native app, like that is shipped with the phone.
Right. Make everything flat.
Exactly.
Flat.
Flat.
And
Nothing.
to be fair, Roman Nurek does say that.
But this is a really good example of going the whole way. So it's like, it doesn't have to be that. This still looks consistent with Android. It looks like it belongs on this device. But it does look different to some of the native apps which ship with it. And I think it really just comes down to having this holistic design that fits everything in. You've got this action bar which looks like a legitimate action bar, and it is. You've got
Yeah, it works right. Everything's in the right place.
That's right. If I
where
want to
you'd
do
expect it to
something,
be.
I can refresh. I know here I've got the compose icon, meaning to add something in. It's all intuitive. It all works the way that I would expect.
And nothing. Now I don't think I've seen every nook and cranny of this app, but just as I've played with it, this is probably the 4th or 5th time I've had a chance to sit down and play with it. What's really impressive is that nothing feels stitched on. There's never that point that we get to with a lot of other apps where we say, oh, this is where they ran out of time and stopped.
This is where the design resources ran out and the developer went, oh, you know what I could do?
Right. And you can see that they've solved a lot of difficult technical problems. Look, this is a buttery smooth thing, but I don't know if you noticed, but there's a little fade out gradient
I
at the
did
top
notice
there,
that,
which
yeah.
actually, isn't. In fact, I will say that a couple of versions ago, there were some devices where we had to take that gradient out because we couldn't make our GPU code run fast enough.
This is a really good example, actually, of using the inspiration of Holo and of the Android theming and applying it within your own app. Because we have something similar to this when you get to the top and bottom of a list view. And this clearly isn't a list view, but it still has that same hinting as to there is more up here.
Yep,
so
exactly.
It's really nice.
All right.
Very cool. All right, so I think we've probably spent enough time on Mint. So thank you very much for coming in and joining us and talking a little bit about the product. We should give some other guys a chance. So
Absolutely.
let's move on to TinyCo.
Indeed.
Can you
One of
guys
my-
hear
one
us
of
and
my
see us all
favorites.
right?
And there's a chair for you right over there.
Oh, cool.
Hey guys.
Hi, how are you?
Hey,
Very
good
well.
to see you. We're just gonna shift around here because we don't have any high tech way to. We need like a little chair carousel. That would
Oh
be
no, we need
awesome.
like a trapdoor because we're on the second floor.
That's
I guess
true.
because we're in the US. So just lower people out and lower them back in.
Exactly. As
then
long
a
as we
little
make it
hologram?
an 80K project, we can expense it.
Absolutely. So first question, TinyCo, yes, not Tiny Company.
Yes, TinyCo.
Excellent. That's probably a good choice. So apologies for mangling your company name. Do you
That's
want
all
to
right.
introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about TinyCo?
Sure. I'm Sean Marr. I'm one of the mobile developers here. We make mobile games. Most of them are freemium games with in-app purchase. And we've been moving everything that we can onto the Android store and trying to support as many devices as possible, including the tablets.
Outstanding. So let's see. So we've installed Tiny Monsters, I think, on the device. Do you we've got it up on screen. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the game? Perhaps it looks great on tablets. So maybe talk a little bit about the tablet aspects and any differences that this may have with the phone version.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we pictured that people would be using the tablet version, maybe at their desks, but probably on their couch or in bed or something like that. We definitely knew that people wanted to get a bigger and better view of their island. For anyone who hasn't played the game, you have your own island that you decorate and buy habitats in, and then you hatch and raise different monsters and then crossbreed them.
Nice.
But we wanted to make sure that people got as big and as clear a view of the island as possible. So we took advantage of the full size of the screen, and we made sure that we had high resolution assets for all of the buildings, all of the monsters, everything that people would be seeing.
The assets look fantastic. I think it's probably the first thing that I noticed. Like, you've got the full screen experience with the sort of the Chrome, the game Chrome, is big enough without being too big. So it doesn't look like it's been stretched, but it's all big enough to touch. And the assets just look gorgeous, really crisp.
Yeah, you guys have come such a long way since I remember when we first got in touch. You guys were working on was it Tap Resort or it was a little island game?
Yes, that would have been Tap Resort.
Yeah, and that was the first thing that we noticed was the assets didn't scale very well, and there's just a lot of things had come over from phone. And I remember we sat down and talked to you about the different form factors in Android, and took a while, but it seems like you guys really took that to heart. I mean, didn't you go back and basically you wrote a cross-platform engine, which works really well. You were able to get great performance out of it. But most importantly, you've got these images that look just fantastic, even at these really high zoom ratios. I'm very impressed.
It just looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were originally, with the older game that you were talking about, we were porting our apps and essentially had two different code bases running. But
always fun.
When we started to take this very seriously, we knew that we needed a cross-platform engine, which we wrote, and probably one of the biggest challenges was how are we going to deal with all these different aspect ratios, and because we knew that we were now dealing with more than one screen size, and just stretching everything wasn't going to cut it.
One thing I do remember too is that we had a talk, and I think you actually, if I remember right, had an excellent blog post about just how you were able to grow your revenue by concentrating on treating Android like Android instead of porting from some other platform that didn't have the same benefits and challenges.
Right. Yeah, it has been a whole different ecosystem, and different strategies have worked well for us. I'm a coder, so I'm not. I probably can't speak too much to the financial side of things, but we have treated each platform on the engineering side. It's all fairly unified, but the monetization strategies are very different on each ecosystem.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Given that you are on the engineering side, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper, if possible, to find out, what were some of the techniques that you used to get past that challenge that you said of all the different aspect ratios and screen sizes. Is there something that you can share with some of the developers watching who are probably facing a lot of those same issues?
Sure, absolutely. Like a lot of games, we're using the NDK. We're writing the bulk of our game code in C++, and like I said, right out of the gate, we knew we needed to deal with this. Not so much the screen size issue, but the aspect ratio issue. Some devices are extremely widescreen, others are taller, than the standard, 4:3. Phone aspect ratio.
I've seen a lot of games which have sort of the black bars along the side to say it really is 4:3. Trust me.
Right. Yeah. We don't pretend that it's 4:3. We actually since we're using the native development kit, we're not using a lot of the built-in Android features for scaling and whatnot. We look at the raw number of pixels on the screen, and based on that, decide how much we're going to have to scale the UI elements and the game elements. Beyond that, we do have high resolution assets that we use, if we do decide we need to scale a button to twice its original size, we use a double-sized art asset for that, so it doesn't look blurry like it would be if you just scaled it up without using a larger asset.
That's a really interesting point. Do you make that decision initially based on the screen size, which assets you'll load, or do you actually make it on an asset-by-asset basis, trying to determine how much it's going to scale?
We don't do the second technique you're talking about would be like level of detail based on how big it is, decide which asset to use. We don't do that. We decide based on the raw number of pixels in the display. We think we're going to need, single size assets or double size assets.
So do you bucket them? I'm really curious. Do you bucket them the same way we do, or do you have a different scheme?
I'm not sure if you. I know in the standard Android SDK, there's a number of folders for medium resolution and high resolution and things like that. We have what we call just the single resolution, the 1x, and the double resolution, the 2x. We're not using other intermediate sizes.
Gotcha.
That probably makes sense. And in fact, we've actually found that for most cases that actually works pretty well. Like it's not always necessary, even when you're using the SDK, to use each of those buckets. And in fact, when you're just providing something very high res, which can then scale back, works pretty well until you get to the point where you almost need a different style asset to work at the reduced resolution.
Yeah. Of course, you're also doing some quite fancy scaling work here.
Yeah, as we're sort of zooming in on the world.
Yeah, we're zooming in and out, and is that just a set of mipmap textures, or do you?
We're not using mipmaps. We're just using the single high resolution texture. That's why you can zoom in as far as you are, so that a single building fills up the entire screen.
Oh wow!
Because we are using those high resolution textures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, mipmaps are really nice for scaling, but of course they use a lot more memory, and we are still somewhat memory constrained.
That's really interesting.
Very politically correct of you.
I would actually be very interested to know how that affects your performance, because typically, what we'll see is mipmaps will take up more room in memory, obviously, but they'll also
render faster.
Exactly, because they eat less GPU bandwidth on the way in, right? So I'm actually really surprised that you're able to get this frame rate with nothing but full resolution samples.
Right. Well, we've always been more constrained by memory than we were by CPU and draw speed. That may be because we don't have millions of triangles on the screen.
That's a good point.
But for us, for the kind of games that we're making right now, it made more sense to use less memory and take the hit to the draw speed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it just looks really smooth. So I think that's probably a good choice.
Yeah.
I love the graphics. Like all of the graphics look fantastic. For all of the, even just the style itself and sort of the faces from the people who pop up and congratulate you.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
It looks like a lot of fun.
Well, I remember I was actually in the pitch meeting when you guys came and showed this to us the first time, and we'd actually just reviewed a whole set of very, very similar games, but this still really blew us away. Kudos to your artists.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I can't take credit for that. We have some amazing artists and some amazing UI people.
Very cool. So I was going to ask, and you may not be the right person on the team to speak to this, but I'll ask anyway, just in case. Having really built this excellent experience on tablet, have you found any significant difference in terms of user engagement? And I mean, frankly, you guys have an app which is paid. So have you found that you're making comparatively more money on users who are using it on tablet devices?
Yeah, I don't have access to the monetization numbers, but I do know that the percentage of our users who are playing on a tablet has definitely been going up over time, and it's we definitely take that into consideration when planning new features, because we know that that's where a lot of our users want to play on a tablet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Particularly for games like this, which are sort of more than just I've got 5 minutes while I'm waiting for my bus. It's more like, okay, I've got an hour to spend gaming now, whether that's on a train or at home or wherever else. So for that experience, I think tablets is fantastic.
Well, and especially when you want that really beautiful immersive graphical experience.
Absolutely.
I mean, this you can see very similar graphics on the phone, but they just won't blow you away like they do here.
Yeah.
I know that publicly you guys have said a few things about how Android was very disappointing at first for TinyCo, but as we worked with you and as you started to see the Android ecosystem as a separate thing, especially being able to take advantage of things like different aspect ratios, different size devices, in a way that made the users of each device happy, then apparently, and this is again what you guys said in your blog post, the monetization just steadily climbed and got much better. And I don't know where it's at now. That was I think a last year is when you guys were saying that. Actually, before this game even came out. But
it's great to see that
it's continued.
Well, you'd like to think so. At the very least, I think if we're seeing apps, games of this sort of quality, and you guys are still investing the resources to create them for tablets, that's probably a good sign.
Oh, holy crap! You get clouds and everything.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I was wondering what the things were, and it's clouds. It's just
Nice.
nice. Cool. All right. Well, we've spent a bunch of time on this. We should give a little bit of a chance to Instapaper to speak
Oh,
as well.
absolutely.
So, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you
you.
for creating an awesome-looking game.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Let's move on. It's such a nice little animation you got going there, Ian. Very impressed.
It's almost like magic the way
is
it moves.
Almost like
Yeah.
it's moving magically. So the last app that we wanted to talk about today was Instapaper. So hopefully we've got the Instapaper guys on the line. Hi guys.
Hey, how you doing? Hey.
Pretty good. Thank you for bearing with us and hanging around. We're hopefully saving the best till last. No offense to everyone who's just gone before. We're supposed to get them out of the room.
Right.
Awkward. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about the company, the app.
Sure. So our company is called MobileLux. My name's Jeff Rock. I'm co-founder. I'm here with Jason Emmerich, who's our lead Android developer. So MobileLux, we make apps for iOS, the Mac, Android, pretty much anywhere there's a screen.
Nice.
A lot of our business is building white label apps for other companies and startups. So Tumblr, we built their first and second generation Android client. We built iHome's Android client for their alarm clock. We built other apps for Random House and some other guys out there on the store. You may not see our name, but we have a lot of people using our apps every day.
Very
It's
cool.
good business.
You may not have seen the name, but you've probably used one of your apps.
Yeah, this arrangement was a little different. We're real good friends with Marco Arment, and he came to us and said, "Look, I just simply don't have the resources to devote to Android development, and I know you guys do this stuff," and he was interested in seeing if we would build it under our name, because he felt like Instapaper would really shine on Android tablets. So we took it over and we developed the Android code base from scratch. We maintain it. We work closely with Marco on the features we're going to implement, timeline. But it is very much a MobileLux / Instapaper production.
Very cool, very cool. So he came to you guys specifically because you've got that experience with Android and sort of understand how to build an app which is sort of a pure Android experience. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we're all, especially MobileX in particular, and Marco, I know he feels this way too. We really we loathe the kind of write once, run anywhere frameworks. We don't, in our experience, we've never seen any of those go particularly well, and I've never heard of anyone that loved them once they used them. So
yeah, that's always been the thing
we're
for
pretty
me.
finicky about being native for the platform, done the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, those write once, run anywhere type platforms are a great idea, and I'd be hugely supportive of them if they produced awesome apps, which I couldn't tell were built on a write once, run anywhere type platform. Sadly, that doesn't seem to be the case. I think
Every time I've ever encountered any sort of automatically generated UI, it's never good.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think at the moment it's definitely the way to go is to really try and build something that is, native for each one. And I mean, that's the thing as well. People act as though it's a huge amount of extra work.
Sorry, we're losing you just a little bit. Can you say?
That's all right. We're just basically talking amongst ourselves. But I see you guys are frozen on our screen as well, so we'll continue to talk amongst ourselves until you unfreeze. Oh, looks like they're back.
Oh, good.
I can see some
Maybe.
movement. Yeah,
Okay.
I can see them on that corner.
Oh, great, great. Yeah, so I think people forget actually the lessons of history, because if you think about even, the first version of Microsoft Office for Mac, for instance, and Office for Mac, a lot of people don't realize is actually a very profitable and well-respected product, but the first version was universally reviled, and it was mostly because they took their Windows product and plopped it
Dumped it in
directly
Mac.
on the Mac. And yeah, that's never going to fly,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And it doesn't fly to go back the other way either. I've had some things that were obviously written for Mac on my Windows machine, and they just don't jibe right.
Well, it's all the little things. It's like you hit a drop down, and the drop down in Mac and Windows is different. It's exactly the same functionality, but it looks different, and it's that cognitive dissonance where you're like, wait, how do I select this? Oh, okay. That slight little pause breaks you out of that mindset of whatever it is that you were doing. So you don't want to have to think about the app. You just want to be able to do whatever the app lets you do.
Right, so respecting the platform and respecting the user who
It's
chose
really
to
about
buy
the
that
user.
platform.
Yeah. It's like you don't
is-
have to worry about us. We can take it, but it's
Right.
it's about the users which are trying to leverage your app. So we've got Instapaper up on the screen. Can you tell us a little bit about the way that you went about designing a tablet-specific version of the app, and sort of what are the key decisions that you made, and how that has affected usage of the app?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think unlike a lot of Android development, we started with tablet primarily. We actually designed out the 7-inch and 10-inch layouts for tablet before we even looked at the phone-based layouts.
That's
We
interesting.
really felt like this was for people that read. There's a lot of competition in this space now for read it later style, consumption, but Instapaper is really for reading. And as soon as we picked up a 7-inch tablet, we really knew that was a great place to be. We deploy onto Kindle as well with the same layouts, and Nook. That was very important because we wanted to get the people that were buying primarily reading devices, as well as serving people in the Google Play Store that have these tablets. So it was a pretty easy decision to make once we held those tablets. That the phone would be a secondary place to run Instapaper, and most likely you're going to want to sit down on your couch or lay in bed and read on a nice Android tablet.
Just looking at it here, I can see straight away what it reminds me of is my Kindle. Just a great experience for being optimized for being able to read content. So it's a very simple display, very sparse, without
Yes.
being too small, which I think is important.
Yeah, we really were focused on simplicity. Instapaper is not a complex interface. We have a lot of opportunities to create little UI mechanisms that are fun or maybe a little overly complex, and we use those. When we for Instapaper, the simplicity of the experience is core, I think, to that whole product.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it's like you start up the app, and it almost looks, and I say this with respect, it almost looks a little boring. You open it up and it's like, oh, it's just a bunch of things to read, and then you click them and there's articles to read. But that, I think, is kind of the point, right? There's no distraction. There's no, oh, what does this app do? How do I use this? What features are available?
There aren't any crazy pop-ups or gigantic menus.
It's just a
That's
bunch of
what's really-
stuff that you've chosen to read, provided in a way optimized for you to be able to read it. I love the fact that you can change the fonts and the profile and everything else.
The other thing that I noticed about this design that I think is really interesting is a lot of people, almost everyone, I think, that writes a tablet app will start with a 2-column layout that's a master detail type of view.
Yeah, like sort of navigation on your left with detail on the right sort of scenario.
And you guys did not do that. You go with a 2-column view that's it makes me think of a newspaper.
Yeah, very
and
much.
I think that's very effective. It's a really interesting layout.
And so that just goes to that same tenet, and we believe that the content is king in Instapaper, and we want to give you as much content without we're not just space filling here. We put 2 columns up so that you could see the most recent articles that you've saved, or get a little bit more content on the screen so you can quickly get into that reading experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of the way that this is presented is, like you say, sort of inspired by newspapers, I would say. In that you can fit probably as many articles, probably not quite as many if you just had this listed vertically with the same amount of text, but it would look kind of weird because you'd have these really long lines
No,
of
and
text.
it wouldn't be nearly as readable either.
No, absolutely not. And so here you've kind of taken that approach, which we've learned from however many decades of printing newspapers, that people can read columns much more easily than lots of long, flat strings. And so I love to see apps which take things which we've learned from other industries and saying, well, you know what, it's actually not that different. What you're creating here is an Instapaper, a way for people to be able to quickly scan, browse, and read content.
Yeah, and in fact, I have to say now, when I click through to one of the stories and it takes up the entire width of the screen, I'm actually kind of disappointed.
That's interesting. I mean, I think it's one of the bigger challenges. So I'd be interested to know, when you're sort of looking at the detailed view for any of the articles, how much of this is reformatted? How much of it are you displaying this are you displaying this in a web view and just pulling the raw content out? Are you doing any kind of reformatting to it?
Yeah, so the Instapaper API provides basically a raw HTML content. We pull that down and cache it locally on your SD card or your local storage. And then we have a web view that just opens up that content, and we apply a cascading style sheet to that and some JavaScript as well. And that allows you to do different things like change the font size, change the font, change the line spacing, line height, the margins, that kind of stuff.
Very cool. It would be,
Yeah, they've got this whole...
Exactly. I mean, we're just sort of clicking on the font control dialog here. And one of the things that I guess I want to point out is that, again, this is another example of an app which doesn't strictly conform to like standard expectations of how an app should look. But it does do some of the like wherever it is close, it's pretty much the same. So you've got the standard share icon on what looks like an action bar, which has actions. It's obvious the way that it's working. I'd kind of like to see an upper affordance here, but that's kind of getting a little bit nitpicky.
I think that as the up affordance becomes more and more common, people are going to start really missing it.
So that's
and some of this work, you got to remember that to target things like the Nook, the last Nook,
Right.
and
that's a good point.
Kindle, we had to go back to 2.1, and that presented some interesting problems. That action bar is not actually the ice cream sandwich action bar that was built. So as the code base kind of modernizes and we can, the new Kindles and the new Nooks, that they've moved off the older code base, they're up to ice cream sandwich now. So
Nice.
we're going to be able to kind of move up to using more system frameworks, which we'd rather be using anyway, quite honestly.
Cool.
A lot of those things were, I don't want to say they're hacks, but they're not
Creative
not probably what
workarounds.
you guys would like to see.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So I mean, I guess what you guys are saying is, if we'd given you a backwards compatible action bar, you would have used it, but we didn't, so you had to do what you could.
That's a familiar story. Yeah, honestly, there's really only one thing after playing the app for a while that bothered me, and that's this the switch for dark mode.
Yeah.
That
got
looks
me
like
too.
it may have been lifted from somewhere else.
Yeah, the dark mode switch. The thing which bothers me more so than the look is that it's not hugely responsive.
Yeah.
So I find myself wanting to swipe it.
Right, but
it
you have
doesn't
to
work
tap
on a
it.
swipe. It's a tap.
Yeah, and having something that looks swipeable that's only tappable is actually really frustrating.
Well, I'm sorry, we lost you for a minute there. What element are you talking about?
If you
They're actually, I can't hear you.
slick, I see what you did there. The dark mode toggle.
Yeah.
It looks like
That's
it should be
gonna change,
swipeable.
Don't worry.
Yay!
Yeah,
Very
it's going to change. We know. And again, some of those were,
Just a quick thing.
time limitations, and we really wanted to get something out to market. But we're definitely constantly looking at this interface, and we're going to be adapting it in the very near future.
Very cool. I mean, I think that's the key to this is its simplicity. So for any of the nitpicks that we have around navigation, it's actually not too big a deal because it's really straightforward. You've only got 2 levels of nav. You can never really get lost because there's only so far you can go. And you're never sort of trying to figure out where are you at, how does this all work. It really is that epitome of something which is easy to use. And again, one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about designing for tablet is to make sure that you don't have excessive white space. And I think one of the tricks that a lot of people do is they just fill it up with fragments or whatever to just have not as long lines. And so I think that's, I know we've talked about this a lot, but I think that's what you've done really well here is thought beyond that as to, well, how can we fill this in a way that makes it a better experience rather than just a less sucky experience?
And not just better, but more appropriate to the activity at hand.
Yeah, exactly.
We at the very beginning of the show, we looked at Mint.com, which also filled space really, really well. And they did it by having sort of a multi-pane view that felt like a little bit like a spaceship control center, which I think was really appropriate to this idea of controlling your money. Whereas this feels a lot more like I just opened up the afternoon paper and I'm going to take a read.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really good observation. Is sort of that difference where Mint did have sort of the gradients and the rounding to make it sort of a more rich sort of 3D sort of experience, and this is exactly the opposite. This is about as flat as an app can be, without disappearing into the background entirely. It's quite monochromatic. It doesn't have blends or gradients or anything like that because, well, books and newspapers don't, right? It's just black and white text optimized for you to be able to read.
But of course, you can see where they've wanted to. They have put in some nice design touches.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not that it's not designed. It's
designed
this way.
minimalistically.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a really important thing. It's tempting for us as engineers, I think, sometimes to go, oh, look at the things I can do, and then to do them. But that can sometimes detract from a much more simple experience, which can be easier for people to use.
Well, we'll be really looking forward to your next release. I know there's a bunch of little things. I think we've given some feedback already. There was that button, the way icons are laid out on the action bar doesn't quite fit the brand new guidelines that just came out a few months ago. But I think you guys are aware of all that and can't wait to see what you guys come up with in your next version.
Definitely. The last thing I did want to ask you guys, I think we're well over the time we had initially planned.
Because we've optimistically budgeted half an hour for talking to 3 different developers that we're very interested in talking to.
Exactly. We don't care if anyone else is watching. We've had a really good time.
That's quite true.
But so the one thing I did want to ask, so you started with tablet. Have you built a phone version as well now?
No, absolutely, yeah. And I think it more falls into your guidelines than the newer guidelines, actually,
kind of cool.
than the tablet interface does. But yeah, we absolutely run on phones at every density and screen layout size, including the newer, like the Galaxy Note layout, which is a kind of a weird place. But yeah, we've got layouts for all phones.
Very cool. So I guess the one question I had then is, based on that, have you seen a difference in user engagement on tablet versus phone? Are people reading longer on the tablet versions? Are those metrics that you guys collect?
Yeah, we do know that while people will use the phone or the tablet really at 3 main times a day, right, while they're eating breakfast, while they're eating lunch, and once they get home and they're around dinner time.
Sure.
But we have noticed that later in the day is more tablet heavy. So we're seeing a lot more tablet use. I think kind of like when people are sitting down. I guess all these commercials they're all right. I mean, when people are in bed or sitting on the couch, kind of watching TV, pull out their tablet.
For me, it's right when my 4G LTE phone runs out of battery. That's when I switch to the tablet.
Time for the tablet. Very nice. All right, perfect. So like I said, we are well out of time. But thank you guys very much for coming on and telling us about Instapaper and your experiences there. And thank you to all of our guests from Mint, TinyCo, for joining us as well. And thank you everyone for watching. And we will be back tomorrow for the App Clinic.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be a very special episode of the App Clinic, by which I mean it will be an episode that will run.
Excellent. That is special. That's very special. We are looking at video player apps, which we were going to look at last week, but decided that we needed to have a full extra week to really understand what was going on in those apps. So, so do tune in tomorrow for that. We are also taking nominations for next week's category, which is shopping apps. We are actually going to choose the apps that we're going to look at during tomorrow's show or before tomorrow's show. So do make sure if you've got a shopping app you'd like us to take a look at, that you do throw it into the moderator queue. Thanks again for watching. My name's Reto.
I'm Ian.
And we'll catch you later.
Take care.